So hello and welcome to the video. At the end of last week's video I just arrived in Jakarta, having flown down on Sri Lankan Airways from Abu Dhabi via Colombo. I thought I'd get this entire trip into one video, but it would be a monster if I did, so I've split it into two. This is the best known and often the best value tier point run available anywhere in the world, and this video, alongside its sibling, will show what that experience is like to help you prepare if you decide that this is a great way for you to gather a chunk of tier points. So if you'd like to see what the experience of coming back on Sri Lankan is like, stick around.
Hi, I'm Matt. I've lived in 5 countries on 4 continents. I've flown over 1.4 million miles. I've visited over 100 countries, every American state, but I'm nowhere near done. So subscribe to see where I go next and perhaps get some inspiration for your next trip.
So it's time to go back to Colombo. I actually flew back into Jakarta on the morning of my departure onwards, and so had plans to hang around landside until the check-in desks opened. But it was the Hajj season and lots of pilgrims were departing to Saudi Arabia, so there were very few seats and it was all a bit noisy and chaotic, not a great environment to pass an hour or two editing videos. So here's where the check-in desks would have been, but I decided to check in online and was very pleased to be able to use a digital boarding pass to get through security in the hope of being able to hang out in the lounge instead. Jakarta Airport is really nice on the departures side, spacious and well maintained. As usual, without interacting with the check-in agents, you're never completely certain where the lounge is going to be, but I'd done my research this time and headed for the Sapphire Plaza Premium Lounge, which helpfully displayed the Sri Lankan logo outside, and they wouldn't let me in. I'd self-connected into Jakarta that morning and had given myself a healthy buffer in case of delay or cancellation, so by the time I got to the lounge there was still over 4 hours to go before the departure, and the lounge's contract with Sri Lankan allowed, I think, for only a 2-hour stay. Which is fine. I've come across rules like this before and there's no point getting angry about things. Indeed, I may well have been so nice to the desk agents that they gave me a wink and told me to come back in about 45 minutes time, and when I did, they duly let me in well over 3 hours before the scheduled departure. And like the terminal, the lounge is really nice. There was a first class area, although it wasn't in use that day. It's a substantial lounge, bathrooms and showers alongside a kids area at this end, superb views of a multi-storey car park through the window. There were 2 manned service areas, this near one focused on coffee, with the far one being a bar. A mixture of seating options, but the lure of the car park was so overwhelming I picked a seat in the window and got some editing done. As for food, there were salad options and an open kitchen with lots of condiments. Plus a few interesting hot options which you ordered from an attendant, which were then made to order. I ordered an ayam percik, apologies for the pronunciation, spicy chicken with rice, and it was superb. Alcohol was served discreetly by attendants in this Muslim country, but from what I could see, a pretty full bar was available even if very little is on display. At the far end of the lounge was a dedicated Singapore Airlines sub-lounge, which was very well hidden. I headed to the gates to get paper boarding passes. It's always wise to get physical ones if your phone is as old as mine, and I caught the plane arriving in from Colombo, a 19-year-old Airbus A330 today, this larger equipment being deployed as Sri Lankan gets a chunk of the pilgrimage business through to Saudi Arabia, and I believe the economy cabin had been virtually full on the way into Jakarta. The plane has an interesting history, having had spells with Italian airline Livingston Air, which I had to Google. It was an Italian leisure airline affiliated with Niki Lauda. After that it had stints in Kuwait and Yemen. The inbound flight was a little tardy, so we were a little late boarding. A little late boarding, not boarding actually, and I stood by the business class boarding finger and felt oddly lonely. Then something happened which has never happened to me before on a flight. I boarded the plane and was invited to sit wherever I wanted. I was the only passenger in the business cabin that day.
Thank you. Sir, wherever you want you can sit.
18 seats, 1 passenger. We've discussed my innate need to follow rules, so of course I went for the seat I'd chosen, which as usual was 2A.
Am I it today?
Yes, you're it today.
Oh, it's only me.
I did though have a justification for this decision at my fingertips.
Well, I'll stick with 2A for the
Okay.
weight and balance and all that. Yeah.
This was my 8th flight of this trip, and it was the first to come with a lie flat seat. It was a 2-2-2 configuration, so it wasn't a cutting edge seat layout. This seat was probably 12 years old, as that's how long it's been in Sri Lankan's fleet, but as the only passenger you really can't complain. Headphones, socks and a glass of champagne were duly delivered, and I settled in for this rather bizarre experience. No problems filming the rest of the cabin on this occasion. We pushed back about an hour late, and I was getting to the point where I could chant along to the safety video, which was played on the good-sized seatback TV. The system had exactly the same entertainment options as the previous flight on the A321. And up once more into a hazy Jakarta afternoon. It's a lie-flat seat, albeit one with a slightly retro control panel. It surprises you that the seat rises straight up at first, which isn't the direction you expect it to move in. Probably needs a gob of glue or perhaps some Velcro to sort that cushioning out. Perhaps Virgin Atlantic can give them some advice on loose panelling. The left armrest can be mechanically wrestled out of the way. The Health and Safety Committee might want to take a look at the edge that's revealed. A mechanical movement rather than an electric one, so you need some strength, as you also did with the privacy screen that can be deployed to separate you from your neighbour, if you have one. Could have done with a wipe, it's fair to say. A light, a USB port and some other AV connection relics. Another point for the maintenance list over there, plus the same remote as we'd had on the A321. The table comes from the other side and was quickly adorned with some more champagne and some lovely cashew nuts. No personal events on this plane. I went for the lamb pepper curry, despite the flight attendant's concerns that I might not enjoy the rice that came with the dish, but I'm an old hand at Sri Lankan rice after my earlier flights, and again I really enjoyed the meal. All served on one tray, but that was fine, particularly when the experience was enhanced with some garlic bread and some red wine. It really was very good. I spent the rest of the 3-hour 53-minute flight reading, enjoying another glass of wine and taking advantage of being the only passenger to get some silly shots of the cabin. I also tried out the flatbed, quite narrow at the shoulder but pretty long. I'm 6'4"-ish and could lie out flat without any difficulty. Reasonable privacy too, with the divider deployed, better done before you recline as it's quite heavy, and best done with gloves on account of the grime. And as was now becoming routine, I went for a cup of tea before landing, peppermint this time, and we descended into Colombo, landing only a half hour or so later than scheduled, as we had made up some time on the way. And Colombo honoured us with a gate connected to the terminal. Indeed, with 2 gates connected to the terminal, with one of them just for me. It could have been awkward being the only passenger in the entire cabin, but the crew pitched the level of interaction just right, and they were attentive without overwhelming me. They were also able to help out behind the curtain, where I believe it was a fair bit busier. A flight experience I will remember for a long time. So one more flight to go, and once again we were deposited straight into the terminal with no transit security to clear. This was scheduled to be an 80-minute connection, so with about 30 minutes of that having been lost through the late arrival, I skipped the Serendib lounge and headed straight to the connecting gate, which, as with our inbound flight, was due to depart from a remote stand, which was the far side of this security lane. I had a moment's anxiety as the line looked neither appealing nor fast moving, but I spotted this sign and once again was able to execute some gratuitous queue jumping to get to the front of the line. I always feel a bit bad doing this, but I guess I had paid for the privilege. They asked the business passengers to wait for the last bus, which is a reasonable approach for a remote gate, and eventually we were called forward with the last of the economy passengers. We enjoyed a slightly ponderous tour of the airfield before pulling up alongside this 19-year-old A320. Sri Lankan's fleet really is a bit old. Into the now familiar environment of the A320 and the now extremely familiar 2A. I talked about this seat in part 1 of the series, so I won't repeat the detail. Yet another glass of champagne, and although there were others in the cabin this time, this was the 4th flight where I had an empty seat next to me. Another on-time departure, and I decided to mix it up a bit with a gin and tonic after takeoff this time, and with some more cashews. I went for the fish for dinner, and once again it was really quite excellent, as was the hypnotically addictive garlic bread. A cognac to finish, and as the crew had darkened the cabin, I decided a nap was in order, and the 4-hour flight time absolutely flew past. So conclusions. All 4 flights delivered 140 tier points to my BA account within a week or so of travel and got me well on my way to my gold renewal. Approaching it analytically, Sri Lankan Airlines isn't very good. All their planes are old, some are very old. They all had some level of maintenance issues, some needed a really good clean, and they all lacked many of the conveniences you find on more modern aircraft. The ground experience in Colombo isn't brilliant, the lounge is decent, but the overall experience of transiting Colombo is nowhere near the experience that any Middle Eastern airline offers in their home airport. And given the difficulties Sri Lanka has experienced as a country in recent years and the impact that's had on the national airline, as has been highlighted by some other YouTubers, you would be forgiven for concluding that travelling on Sri Lankan comes with some risk of delay, cancellation, or perhaps even worse. But I enjoyed all 4 flights despite the shortcomings. There's a strong service ethic on the ground and in the air that's just missing from a lot of European business class experiences these days. You feel looked after, you feel special to be travelling in a premium cabin, and it feels like a bit of a flashback to the good old days of flying when nothing was really too much trouble for a premium traveller. The food was all excellent, a good range of drinks were on offer, and as I've said, the service was consistently friendly and efficient. And even though the seats were old, they have an old school level of comfort associated with them that modern seats just don't offer. I slept quite well, and actually thought that Sri Lankan's newest seat in the A321 was actually the least comfortable of the 3 I tried. I paid £805 for this ticket, which harvested 560 tier points, plus just over 8,000 avios, 1 per mile flown. It's exceptional value. Plus, and I rarely do this, I was able to change my flights without penalty after booking, which is something a discounted business ticket usually doesn't allow you to do. It's exceptional value. Abu Dhabi is a pain to get to. Sri Lankan also flies from Dubai, which is a route which also yields 140 tier points, but the fare is much higher, as it is from other Middle Eastern cities that might be more easier for you to get to. Abu Dhabi is the sweet spot for this particular run. And Jakarta may not be the Southeast Asian destination you'd pick to fly to, but it's a fun place to visit and I enjoyed my time there. I would happily travel on Sri Lankan again, and if this value is still available when I next need to renew my status, I will be very keen to repeat this trip. And if you need tier points in bulk, it's well worth a look. So thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed it. Please like, comment and subscribe if you're new, and if you'd like to support what I'm doing, there's a Patreon account, the link to which is in the description below. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.
This yours? Do you take a credit